Wolf cubs kept breaking out of the Imperial Nursery. Part 1. The Impossible Escapes. The alarms should have gone off. They always should have gone off, but they never did. Security Chief stood in the empty nursery, his golden eyes scanning the 7 heating pods where the Emperor's cubs should have been sleeping. The pods were warm. The blankets were pushed aside. The cubs were gone. Again. Was a warrior who had fought in 30 battles. He had scars across his muzzle and a reputation for breaking bones with his bare claws. But right now, standing in this nursery filled with soft toys and warming lights, he felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear. The Emperor's cubs were the most protected beings in the entire empire. The nursery had walls made of battle-grade steel. The doors used genetic locks that only opened for approved caretakers. Cameras watched every corner. Motion sensors covered every floor tile. The AI system monitored heat signatures, movement, and even the breathing patterns of the cubs. And yet 7 small cubs, barely old enough to walk properly, had escaped. For the 3rd time this month cycle. Pulled up the security footage on his wrist device. He watched it again and again. The cubs were in their pods, sleeping peacefully. Then one by one they woke up. The eldest, a female cub named Senna, climbed out first. She sniffed the air. Then she walked to the door. The door opened. No alarm, no genetic scan. The door simply opened as if it wanted to let her through. The other cubs followed. They walked in a little line, stumbling sometimes because their legs were still small and clumsy. They walked down the corridor, through 3 more security doors, and disappeared from camera view. Every door opened for them. Every sensor stayed quiet. It was impossible. Knew where they would be. They were always in the same place. He walked through the corridors of the Imperial Palace, past guards who lowered their eyes in shame. He went down into the maintenance levels, where the air was warmer and the lights were dimmer. Section 7 Gamma. Climate control systems. He found them in a small alcove where the heating pipes ran through the walls. 7 cubs, piled on top of each other like a furry mountain, all of them deeply asleep. And beneath them, sitting very still with a look of confused worry on his face, was a human. The human was old. His hair was gray and thin. His skin was wrinkled and spotted with age. He wore the simple gray uniform of a maintenance worker. His name tag said M. Cole Climate Systems. Cole looked up with tired eyes. He did not try to run. He did not try to explain. He just sat there with 7 royal cubs snoring on his lap and said, "I didn't take them, I swear. They just showed up." Stared at him, his claws extended slowly from his fingers. "You expect me to believe," growled, "that the heirs to the throne walked through the most secure facility in the empire, came down to the maintenance tunnels, and climbed onto your lap by themselves?" "Yes," said, "because that's what happened." One of the cubs, the smallest male named, made a soft whimpering sound in his sleep. Without thinking, gently rubbed the cub's back, settled down immediately and started making a low, happy rumbling noise. Had never heard a cub make that sound before. It was a sound of complete peace. Cole was a strange creature to find in the Imperial Palace. He was human. Humans were small, weak, and had no claws or fangs. They could not run fast or see in the dark. By all logic, they should have been prey. But they were not prey, remembered the war. 30 years ago, the Empire had tried to conquer human space. It should have been easy. Humans were soft, their ships were smaller, their soldiers were fragile. But humans did not surrender. They did not run. They fought in ways that made no sense. They hid in tunnels and struck from shadows. They flew their ships into cruisers. They kept fighting when they should have been dead. The war lasted 8 years. The one technically. They took human colonies. They captured human prisoners, but the cost was enormous. And the humans who survived did not break. They just waited. Cole had been a soldier in that war. He had killed many. Then he was captured, and instead of being executed, he was put to work. A peace integration program, the politicians called it. Show the humans they could live under rule. 30 years later was still here. He fixed heating systems. He ate his meals alone. He spoke to no one. He was forgotten. Until now. Should have killed him. A human touching the royal cubs. It was unthinkable. It was an offense worthy of death by claw. But the cubs were so peaceful, had seen them in the nursery many times. They were always restless. They cried and whimpered. They refused to sleep. The caretakers said it was normal for cubs to be anxious in their first year. Looking at them now, piled on this old human's lap, they did not look anxious at all. They looked happy. "How are you doing this?" demanded. "I'm not doing anything," said. "I sit here on my break, I eat my lunch. Sometimes I hum a little old songs from Earth, and they just appear. They climb up and fall asleep. I don't know why." "You must be using some kind of technology, some human trick." Laughed. It was a small, tired laugh. "Friend, I'm 62 years old. I have bad knees, a weak heart, and I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast. I don't have any tricks. I'm just tired, and apparently so are they." Did not know what to do. His training told him to arrest the human. His instincts told him something else. The cubs had chosen this human. They had walked through walls of security to reach him. Why? Made a decision. He would not kill the human, not yet. First, he needed answers. "You will come with me," said. "You will be questioned. If I find any evidence that you have harmed or manipulated these cubs, I will tear you apart with my own claws." Looked down at the sleeping cubs. Very gently he stroked Senna's ear. She made a small, contented sound. "Can I at least wait until they wake up?" asked. "They look so peaceful, I don't want to disturb them." Stared at the human for a long moment. Then, despite himself, he sat down on the floor across from and waited. The cubs slept for another 2 hours. Watched them the entire time. He watched the way they curled against the human's warmth. He watched the way their small chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm. He watched hum quietly, some strange earth melody, and he watched the cubs sink deeper into sleep with every note. Something was happening here. Something did not understand. And he was determined to find out what it was. Wolf cubs kept breaking out of the Imperial Nursery. Part 2, The Scent That Calms. The tests went on for 3 weeks. Sat in medical rooms while scientists poked him with needles and scanned him with machines. They took his blood. They measured his heartbeat. They recorded his voice and analyzed the sounds he made when he hummed. They even collected his sweat and studied it under powerful microscopes. Did not complain. He had learned long ago that complaining did nothing. They were proud creatures. They did not care what humans thought or felt, so he sat quietly and let them do their work. The cubs were tested too, but separately. The scientists wanted to see what happened when they were kept away from. The results were immediate and terrible. On the first day without, the cubs became restless. They paced around the nursery and scratched at the doors. They refused to play with their toys. On the second day, they stopped eating. The caretakers tried everything. They brought fresh meat, warmed to the perfect temperature. They brought sweet fruits from the garden planets. The cubs sniffed the food and turned away. On the third day, the howling started. Cubs did not howl like adult wolves. Their voices were small and high, but when all 7 cubs howled together, the sound filled the entire palace. It was a sound of sadness and fear and loneliness. Guards who heard it felt their hearts twist in their chests. The Empress Mother, who had given birth to the cubs and then returned to her military duties as was tradition, came to the nursery to see what was wrong. She found her children huddled together in a corner, shaking and crying and calling out for something they could not name. She demanded answers. The scientists had none. On the 4th day, made a decision. He brought to the nursery. The moment the door opened and the cubs smelled him, everything changed. Senna's head snapped up. Her golden eyes locked onto. She let out a small yip and ran toward him on her unsteady legs. The other cubs followed. They surrounded, jumping up against his legs, trying to climb him like a tree, knelt down and let them pile onto him. Within minutes, they were calm. Within an hour, they were eating from his hands. The scientists watched through the observation window, their ears flat with confusion. A young scientist named was the one who finally found an answer. She was not like the other. She was small for her kind, with curious eyes and a habit of asking too many questions. She had spent years studying alien species, and she had read texts that most considered beneath them. She called to her laboratory late one night. "I found something," she said. Her voice was shaking with excitement. "In the old xenobiology archives, studies from before the Empire when we first started exploring the galaxy." She showed a document on her screen. It was a research paper about humans, written by explorers who had observed them from far away, decades before the war. "Humans are strange creatures," read aloud. "They have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no armor. They cannot run fast or jump high, and yet they dominated their home planet. They became the apex species. How?" Growled impatiently. "Everyone knows humans are stubborn. They refuse to die. This is not new information." Wait said, "Listen to this part." She scrolled down and continued reading. "Humans did not conquer their world through strength. They conquered it through bonds. They formed relationships with other species. They tamed wolves into dogs. They tamed wild cats into pets. They tamed horses and cattle and birds. Everywhere they went, other creatures followed them willingly." His ears perked up. "The researchers studied why," said. "They found that humans produce a unique combination of signals. Their body temperature is stable and warm, perfect for small creatures to rest against. Their heartbeat is slow and steady, like a calming drum. They make soft sounds with their voices, low hums and gentle words that trigger safety responses in mammalian brains." She turned to face, her eyes bright with discovery. "Humans are walking safe havens," she said. "Their bodies tell other creatures, you are protected here, you can rest, you can sleep, nothing will hurt you. It is not magic or technology, it is biology. Evolution made them this way." Thought about Cole, sitting in his alcove, humming old Earth songs. He thought about the cubs piling onto the human's lap like he was their mother. "Our cubs are anxious in their first year," continued. "They need constant warmth and pack presence. Many of them do not survive. The stress is too much for their small hearts. But this human, his body tells them exactly what they need to hear. He makes them feel safe in a way that even we cannot." Did not want to believe it. Humans were the enemy. Humans were weak and strange and did not belong in the Empire. The idea that they possessed something lacked was offensive. But the evidence was clear. The cubs thrived near, they suffered without him. Took the information to the Emperor. The Undying was old for but still powerful. His body was covered in battle scars. One of his eyes was missing, replaced with a golden mechanical sphere. He had ruled the Empire for 40 years, and he had led the war against humanity personally. He listened to his report in silence. When it was finished, he stood and walked to the window of his throne room. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, towers of steel and glass reaching for the sky. "Bring me to him," said. That night, the Emperor of the Empire walked into a maintenance alcove in Section 7 Gamma. Cole looked up from his cup of cold tea and nearly dropped it when he saw who was standing in front of him. The cubs were there, as always. They were sleeping in a pile around his feet, their small bodies warm against his legs. Did not speak, he simply stood and watched. He watched the humans' gentle hands resting on the cubs' backs. He watched Senna, his eldest daughter, snoring peacefully with her head on the human's knee. He watched the rise and fall of small chests, the twitch of dreaming paws, the absolute stillness of deep and restful sleep. His children had never slept like this in the nursery, not once. "You fought in the war," finally said. Yes, answered. His voice was quiet. You killed my soldiers. Yes. And now you comfort my children. Look down at the sleeping cubs. They came to me. I didn't ask for this. I don't even understand it. But they seem to need something and somehow I can give it to them. So I do. Was silent for a long time. Then he made a decision that would change his empire forever. You will be transferred to the nursery, the emperor said. You will care for my cubs. You will be given quarters, proper food, whatever you need. In return, you will keep them safe and calm until they are old enough to no longer need you. Blinked, you're not going to kill me. Turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back. My cubs have chosen you, he said. Does not argue with his children's instincts. Do not make me regret this decision, human. He left. Sat in the silence, surrounded by sleeping cubs, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought him here. He had come to this planet as a prisoner. He had stayed as a ghost, invisible and forgotten. Now, somehow, he had become something else entirely. He looked down at Senna. She yawned in her sleep, showing tiny fangs that would one day grow into weapons. Then she snuggled closer to his warmth and sighed contentedly. Smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in years. Okay, he whispered to no one. Okay, I guess we're doing this. Outside the alcove stood guard. He had heard everything. And for the first time since this strange situation began, he felt something like hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human could help them. Wolf cubs kept breaking out of the Imperial Nursery. Part 3, The Pack Accepts. Became the Den Keeper. It was an old title from ancient history. In the early days, before they built their empire, lived in caves and dens. The Den Keeper was the one who watched over the young while the hunters went out for food. It was a position of trust and honor. Giving this title to a human caused an uproar. The traditionalists in the imperial court were furious. How could a prey species care for the future rulers of the empire? How could an enemy, a former soldier who had killed, be allowed near the royal bloodline? They demanded that be removed. Some demanded he be executed. The emperor ignored them, and so moved into a small room connected to the nursery. It was simple but comfortable. He had a bed, a chair, a window that looked out over the palace gardens. He had access to the kitchens whenever he wanted, and the servants, while they looked at him strangely, did not treat him badly. Most importantly, he had the cubs. They followed him everywhere. When he walked to the gardens, they walked with him in a wobbly line. When he sat down to eat, they sat around his feet and watched him with curious eyes. When he lay down to sleep at night, they piled onto his bed until there was barely room for him. Learned their personalities quickly. Senna was the leader. She was brave and curious and always the first to try new things. She would climb onto shoulders and survey the world like a tiny queen. Was the smallest and the shyest. He was afraid of loud noises and new places. He liked to hide in his arms and peek out at the world from safety. There were twins and who never stopped playing. They wrestled and chased each other all day long, and they often crashed into his legs and knocked him over. Thane was the serious one. He watched everything with intense golden eyes, as if he was studying the world and taking notes. Myra was gentle and sweet. She loved flowers and soft things. She would bring small gifts she found, leaves and pebbles and interesting bugs. And then there was Rook, who was wild. He bit everything, climbed everything, and feared nothing. Had to watch him constantly to keep him from hurting himself. 7 cubs, 7 different personalities, loved them all. He told them stories at night. He could not speak well, so he told them in English, using simple words and big gestures. He told them about Earth, about forests and oceans and mountains covered in snow, about wolves and dogs and the ancient bond between them and humans. A long time ago, he would say, while the cubs gathered around him, wolves and humans were strangers. Wolves hunted in packs. Humans hunted in groups. Sometimes they fought over food. But one day, a brave wolf and a brave human decided to work together instead of fighting. They shared their food. They protected each other from danger. And from that day on, wolves and humans were friends. Senna, who was learning to understand English faster than the others, would ask, "What happened to the wolves?" "They became dogs," told her. "They stayed with humans for thousands and thousands of years. They became family." The cubs did not fully understand, but they understood the warmth in his voice, and that was enough. The assassination attempt came on a quiet night. Was sitting in the nursery, reading an old book he had found in the palace library. The cubs were playing on the floor around him. A servant brought him a cup of tea, which drank without thinking. The poison worked fast. Within minutes felt his heart racing, his vision blurred, his hands started shaking. He dropped the book and tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He fell to the floor. The cubs noticed immediately. Senna ran to him, whimpering. She pawed at his face and licked his cheek, trying to wake him up. The door opened. 3 walked in. They were not servants. They were warriors dressed in traditional robes that hid their weapons. "The human is dying," one of them said. "Soon the corruption will be cleansed from the royal bloodline. The cubs will forget him. They will be pure again." Senna understood enough to know these were bad people. She turned toward them and did something had never seen her do before. She growled. It was a tiny sound, high and weak, but it was a growl, and then the other cubs joined her. 7 small bodies formed a circle around, facing outward. 7 sets of tiny fangs were bared. 7 small voices growled at the attackers. The assassins laughed. "Look at them, protecting a human. This is what he has done to them. They have forgotten what they are." One of the assassins stepped forward, reaching toward Senna to push her aside. Senna bit him. Her teeth were small, but they were sharp. She bit down on his hand with all her strength and did not let go. The assassin screamed and tried to shake her off, but she held on, snarling and biting harder. The other cubs attacked. They jumped and bit and scratched, a tiny furry storm of claws and teeth. They were small and weak, but they were the children of the undying, and they would not let anyone hurt their human. The door burst open again, charged in with his claws extended. Behind him came palace guards, weapons ready. The fight was short. The assassins were dragged away, stood over them, his chest heaving with rage. "Traitors," he snarled. "You tried to murder a member of the Imperial household. You tried to harm the cubs." "He is not one of us," one of the assassins spat. "He is a human, a pest." Tore out his throat with one swipe of his claws. The other 2 assassins did not live much longer. Medical teams rushed in to help. They gave him medicine to fight the poison. They worked through the night to keep him alive. The cubs refused to leave his side. When the doctors tried to move them, they growled and snapped. Finally, the doctors gave up and worked around them. Woke up 2 days later. The first thing he saw was 7 pairs of golden eyes staring down at him. Senna was sitting on his chest, was curled up against his neck. The others were pressed against him on all sides. "You're awake," Senna said. Her English was getting better. "We were scared." His throat was dry and his body ached, but he managed to smile. "I'm okay," he whispered. "I'm okay. Thank you for protecting me." "Pack protects pack," Senna said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Felt tears in his eyes. He had not cried in 30 years, not since the war. But now, lying in a bed surrounded by cubs who had risked their lives for him, he could not stop the tears from falling. The door opened. Emperor entered. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at with his one good eye. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You fought my people," finally said. "You killed many. Why do you care for my children?" Looked at the cubs around him. He thought about the question carefully. "Kids are kids," he said. "War's got nothing to do with them. They didn't choose to be born in an empire. They didn't choose to be royalty. They're just kids, and every kid deserves someone who cares about them. Nodded slowly. My children bit the assassins. They formed a wall around you. They would have died to protect you. I would die to protect them too, said. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something never expected. He bowed his head. You have the loyalty of the Emperor's children, said. This makes you family. Rest now, Den Keeper, heal. Your pack needs you. The Emperor turned and left. Lay back, surrounded by warmth and soft fur and the quiet breathing of sleeping cubs. For the first time in 30 years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He was home. Wolf cubs kept breaking out of the Imperial Nursery. Part 4, The Lesson of the Soft Heart. 5 years passed. The cubs were not cubs anymore. They had grown into young, tall, and strong, with sharp claws and sharper minds. They attended military academies during the day and studied politics and history at night. They were being prepared to rule. But they were different from previous generations. Had watched them grow. He had been there for their first words, their first steps, their first hunts. He had bandaged their wounds and dried their tears. He had told them thousands of stories about Earth, about wolves and humans, about kindness and courage and the power of working together. And they had listened. Senna was 17 now, nearly an adult by standards. She was the heir to the throne, chosen by her father to rule after him. She was fierce in combat, unbeaten in every training match she had ever fought. But she was also something else. She was diplomatic. The other young at the academy did not know what to make of her. When disputes arose, Senna did not immediately reach for her claws. Instead, she asked questions. She listened. She tried to understand both sides before making a decision. "Why do you talk so much?" one of her classmates asked her once. "A true warrior acts. Words are for the weak." Senna smiled. "Words are tools," she said. "Like claws, a smart warrior knows when to use each one." Her classmate did not understand, but others did. Slowly, Senna gathered followers, young who were tired of the old ways, who wanted something different. They saw in Senna a new kind of strength. The galaxy noticed. The empire had been built through conquest. For centuries, they had expanded by taking what they wanted and destroying anyone who resisted. The other species of the galaxy feared them. Some hated them. No one trusted them. But now rumors were spreading. The heirs to the throne were different. They talked instead of attacked. They negotiated instead of threatened. Could it be true? Could the wolves be changing? An interstellar summit was called. Representatives from a dozen species gathered on a neutral station to discuss trade and borders and the endless small conflicts that plagued the galaxy. The delegation was led, for the first time in history, by a royal heir. Senna stood before the assembly. She was the youngest person in the room and the only who had never killed in battle. The delegates watched her with suspicion and curiosity. "I know what you think of us," Senna began. Her voice was calm and clear. "You think we are monsters. You think we only understand violence. For many generations this was true. My ancestors took what they wanted and cared nothing for the suffering they caused." The room was silent. No had ever spoken like this before. "But I am not my ancestors," Senna continued. "I was raised differently. I was taught by someone who showed me another way. He told me a saying from his home world, a saying I have never forgotten." She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each delegate. "The strength of the pack is the wolf," she said, "and the strength of the wolf is the pack. My people have always understood the first part. We are strong alone, but we forgot the second part. We are stronger together. We forgot that the pack is not just our own kind. The pack can be anyone who stands with us, who works with us, who trusts us." She spread her arms wide. "I am here to build a bigger pack, not through conquest but through cooperation, not through fear but through trust. I know this will take time. I know you have no reason to believe me yet, but I am asking for a chance. Let us work together. Let us build something better. The delegates did not applaud. They were too shocked, but they did not leave either. And when the summit ended 3 days later, more agreements had been signed than in any summit before. Back on the home world, the traditionalists were furious. A council was called. The old warriors, the generals who had built the empire through blood and fire, gathered to demand answers. How could the heir speak of cooperation? How could she show weakness before the galaxy? The human has corrupted her, one general declared. He has filled her head with soft ideas. He has made her weak. We must remove him from the palace and purify the bloodline. The other cubs, now young adults themselves, stood beside Senna. They had come to defend their teacher. Weak stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. I have seen my sister defeat every opponent in the academy. I have seen her lead soldiers who would die for her. She is not weak. She talks instead of fights, the general sneered. Because talking is harder, said. Any animal can bite. It takes intelligence to find another way. The generals turned to Thane, hoping the serious, thoughtful one would agree with them. But Thane shook his head. Our empire is dying, he said quietly. We have conquered everyone we can conquer. We have taken everything we can take. And what do we have? Fear, hatred. No allies, only enemies waiting for us to show weakness. Is this what we want for our future? Myra spoke next, her gentle voice filling the chamber. The human taught us that strength is not just claws and fangs. Strength is also patience. Strength is understanding. Strength is knowing when not to fight. Finally, Rook, who had grown from a wild cub into a fierce young warrior, stepped forward. He had a reputation for loving battle more than any of his siblings. I love to fight, he said. Everyone knows this. But even I know that a warrior who only knows how to destroy will eventually destroy himself, taught us how to build, how to protect, how to care for something beyond ourselves. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. The chamber fell silent. Emperor, who had been watching from his throne, finally rose. He was very old now. His muzzle was gray and his movements were slow, but his voice was still strong. I remember the war against the humans, he said. I remember thinking they were weak because they were small. I remember being wrong. They fought us for 8 years. They never surrendered. Do you know why? The generals waited. Because they were fighting for each other, said. Not for territory or glory, for their pack. Every human soldier I captured told me the same thing. They would die for their family, their friends, their home. This is what made them impossible to break. He looked at his children, standing together, defending their human teacher. My children have learned this lesson, he said. They have learned what true strength means, and I am proud of them. He turned to, who was standing in the corner, trying to stay invisible. Come here, human. Walked forward slowly. He was 67 now, his hair completely white, his steps careful and measured, but he stood straight before the emperor. You have served my family for 10 years, said. You have raised my children to be better than I was. For this, I give you a new title. He placed his hand on shoulder. From this day forward, you are pack father of the imperial line. You are family, in name and in law. Any who threaten you will answer to the throne itself. Blinked, he did not know what to say, so he said the only thing that came to mind. Thank you, your majesty. Can I go take a nap now? It's been a long day. Senna laughed, then her siblings laughed. Even's ancient face cracked into something like a smile. Yes, pack father, the emperor said, you may rest, you have earned it. And so Cole, former prisoner of war, former maintenance worker, became the father of an empire. He still did not fully understand how it had happened. But he was too tired to worry about it. Wolf cubs kept breaking out of the Imperial Nursery. Part 5, The Old Wolf's Rest. 20 years had passed since first felt those small, warm bodies climb onto his lap. The galaxy had changed. The Empire was no longer an empire. It was now called the Compact, a coalition of worlds working together instead of one species ruling over others. Senna had made it happen. Through years of careful diplomacy, she had transformed her father's conquest into something new, something better. Had died 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his children. In his last days, he had told Senna that he was proud of what she had built. He had told her that humans had taught him something valuable, even though he had spent most of his life fighting against them. "They showed me what real strength looks like," he had said. "Not the strength of the claw, the strength of the heart that knows when to stay its hand." Senna was empress now. She ruled with wisdom and fairness. Under her leadership, the compact had grown to include species who had once been enemies. Even humans had joined, their old war forgiven if not forgotten. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries. Had watched it all happen. He was 82 years old now, and his body was failing. His heart was weak. His lungs struggled to pull in air. His legs could no longer carry him far. He spent most of his days in a sunlit room in the palace, sitting by a window that looked out over gardens filled with flowers from 100 different worlds. But he was never alone. Senna visited him every day, no matter how busy she was. She would sit beside his chair and tell him about the challenges she faced, the decisions she had made, the problems she was trying to solve. Just like she had when she was a cub, learning to understand the world. "You always give good advice," she told him once. "Even when you say nothing, I just talk to you and somehow the answer becomes clear." "That's not advice," said with a tired smile. "That's you being smart. I learned from the best." Her siblings came too. Thane brought books and read too in the evenings. Myra brought flowers from the garden and arranged them on his windowsill. Rook told loud stories about his adventures and made laugh until he coughed, and came together, still inseparable after all these years, and played cards with him for hours. Who had grown from the shyest cub into a quiet, thoughtful diplomat, simply sat with in comfortable silence. Sometimes that was the best company of all. And there was a new generation now. Senna had children of her own, 3 cubs, bright-eyed and curious and full of energy. She brought them to meet grandfather regularly. The moment they saw him, they would run across the room and climb onto his lap, just like their mother had done 30 years before. Would hold them and tell them stories. The same stories he had told Senna, about Earth and wolves and the ancient bond between species, about kindness and courage and the power of love. The cubs would fall asleep against his chest, warm and safe, and would sit very still and feel complete. A human diplomatic ship arrived at the home world. It carried an envoy from Earth with an offer for. "The Terran government wants to honor you," the envoy said. She was a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, and she looked at with something like wonder. "You're a hero back home. You helped end a war. You changed an empire. We want to bring you back to Earth to give you the recognition you deserve." Looked out the window at the alien sky. The sun here was larger and redder than Earth's sun. The trees in the garden had blue leaves. Everything was different from the world where he had been born. "I appreciate the offer," he said slowly, "but I don't think I'll be taking that trip." "You don't want to go home?" Smiled. "I am home. My pack is here." The envoy did not understand, but she accepted his decision and left. That night, Senna came to his room with tears in her eyes. "The doctors told me," she said. They say it won't be long now." Reached out and took her hand. Her claws were large enough to tear through metal, but she held his fragile fingers with perfect gentleness. "It's okay," he said. "I've had a good life, a better life than I ever expected. I came here as a prisoner and I found a family. That's more than most people get." "I'm not ready," Senna whispered. "I'm the Empress. I rule 100 worlds, but I'm not ready to lose you." "You won't lose me," said. "I'll always be with you. In the lessons I taught you, in the way you lead, in the stories you'll tell that's what family means. We carry each other forward even when we're gone." Senna laid her head on his chest, just like she had when she was small, stroked her fur and hummed an old earth lullaby. On his last night, they gathered in the palace garden. All 7 of his children were there. All 3 of his came too, gray-muzzled now but still fierce, still loyal. The scientist who had first explained why the cubs were drawn to humans, dozens of others whose lives had touched over the years. They sat under alien stars, surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds. The cubs were asleep around's feet, just like the first time. Some things never changed. Looked up at the sky. He thought about Earth, so far away. He thought about the war and the years of loneliness, and the day when 7 small cubs had escaped the most secure facility in the galaxy just to sleep on his lap. "I want to tell you one last story," he said. Everyone gathered close to listen. A long time ago on Earth there was a legend about 2 human children who were raised by a wolf. Their names were Romulus and Remus. The wolf found them when they were bobbies, alone and helpless. She could have eaten them. They were prey after all. But instead she fed them with her own milk. She kept them warm. She raised them as her own cubs. He paused to cough, then continued. Those children grew up to build a great city. They called it Rome. It became one of the most powerful civilizations in human history. And it all started because a wolf chose love over hunger. Because she saw something in those helpless creatures that was worth protecting. Looked at Senna, at all of his children, at the sleeping peacefully in the grass. "I always thought that story was about humans," he said. "About how we were saved by wolves. But now I think it's really about something bigger. It's about the bond between different kinds of creatures. About how we make each other better. About how the most powerful thing in the universe isn't claws or fangs or weapons." He smiled. "It's love." Senna was crying again. So were the others. Evan's good eye was wet. "I'm tired now," said softly. "I think I'll take a nap." He closed his eyes. The cubs stirred around him, instinctively pressing closer, sharing their warmth with the human who had given them so much. The stars turned overhead. The night was quiet and peaceful. Cole, former soldier, former prisoner, pack father of the Imperial line, slept. He did not wake up. A century later, the Compact was the most stable and peaceful political body in the galaxy. Species that had once been enemies now worked together. Wars that had lasted generations had finally ended. In the Imperial Nursery, now renamed the Cole Nursery, there stood a statue. It showed a seated human with 7 cubs in his lap, all of them asleep. A plaque at the base read, "Cole, pack father. He taught us that strength is the claw, but wisdom is the heart." Every child learned his name. Every heir to the throne was taught his lessons. And sometimes, late at night, the caretakers would swear they could hear an old earth lullaby drifting through the halls. The legend said that Cole never really left. He was still there, watching over the cubs, keeping them safe, helping them sleep. Because that's what family did. They stayed. Forever.